Okay, welcome to the this month's meeting of the Firefighter Book Club, and today we're covering Richard Gasaway's book, Situational Awareness, one of his many books on situational awareness, and we're going to cover some of the topics in here, and just want to get you guys prepared. Next month is going to be Pride and Ownership by Rick Lasky. I don't have his book to show you. I kind of threw this out on the Facebook group the other day. I was like, oh, I just finished Rich's book, and I need to start digging back into Lasky's book again, and I couldn't find it. I've loaned it to somebody that didn't return it, and I need to start getting some library fees out there. So I had to actually order another one from Rick Lasky to get shipped out to me to kind of peruse through it again. I've read it in the past. So that's March. We're going to do Pride and Ownership. April, we just have another one that has doctor in front of their name. So I'm getting into these people that know a lot more than me and a lot smarter than me. But Dr. Judy Glick, she's going to do flow-based leadership, and she kind of talks about being in the flow. And she did a bunch of research with the Georgia Smoke Divers program to kind of talk about how that links into being in the flow. So that's kind of where we're going. The following month, May, we have Nick Papa. We're going to do coordinating ventilation. So really excited about that. As much as I love the leadership books, we're actually going to do one on firefighting. So that'll be good. And that's where we're going. And we have the rest of the year planned out. We're just kind of finalizing dates to see what else we have going on. But so, Rich, welcome to the Firefighter Book Club. Love having you on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's quite an honor, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Well, I had 3 working structure fires over the last 2 days, so we'll see if I can actually carry on the conversation. I already told Mike Richardson he might have to step in here and carry on the conversation after a while. So I'm already starting off with fatigue as my first situational awareness barrier going into this, so it should be fun. But
well played.
Well, I mean, fatigue is that's pretty normal in the fire service, but and I think that's the cool thing. We got to link a lot of this to kind of what we do and go through it. So I wanted to start off with, so how did you actually come about, not writing this book per se, but actually all of your books, and how did you start doing that deep dive into situational awareness?
Yeah, thanks for asking. It was a journey that didn't start where it ended with no thought that it was going to end how it ended. I was like many, I was a student of firefighter near misses and casualties and had read a lot of firefighter fatality reports. And along the way, I realized, as probably others have realized, that there was in those reports some really important questions left unanswered. And there's a variety of reasons, and I don't know if we necessarily want to go down that road and talk about that specific nuance, but we could if you want. But one of the questions that was burning in my mind is, when those responders were operating at those incidents where things were happening that were going to go bad, that was going to end in tragedy, how could they not see it coming? There were so many clues and signs and indicators that the incident that they were operating at was going to end in disaster. Not every time was there that many indicators, but there were plenty of times when there were indicators. How could they not see it? And the second thing that perplexed me was, seemingly sometimes they did see it, but they did nothing to change their course of action, even though there were very strong indicators that not only did they acknowledge that things were getting worse, but they didn't proactively change that course. Like, you're on a train, you're looking down the tracks, you see that the rails are busted up, and instead of hitting the brakes, you throttle up the engine, like you're going to barrel on through it and it's going to all be okay on the other side if you just get through where the tracks are missing. So it was over a course of time that all of that was building a level of frustration inside of me. And something happened, Jesse, that I'm not very proud of, but I'm comfortable talking about it now. And that is, I started to become very judgmental of those people who were involved in those incidents. And I guess as you read about so many responders that get severely hurt or killed, you start to become cynical and jaded toward the people who seemingly let that happen. So I started to adopt a mindset of being judgmental, like what you would see on social media today. If somebody posted a video and those people would go down in the comments and throw their hate around, I wasn't throwing my hate around publicly, but I was throwing the hate around in my mind and in my heart about them. And then I had a like a moment of clarity that came to me. And when I realized that as I was judging them, I couldn't be learning at the same time. The judging mind cannot be a learning mind. You can either judge or you can learn, but you can't judge and learn simultaneously. And I found myself being very much judgmental without learning. So when I shifted my mind to learning, I shifted the type of questions that I was asking. Like initially, when I had that judgmental mind, my question would be like, what the hell were they thinking when they did that? Or how could they be so stupid to let that happen? That was my judgmental mind, my hate-driven thinking. My learning mind started to ask questions like, why did that make sense to them at the time when things went bad? Why did that make sense that they were where they were and doing what they were doing? Because it had to make sense or they wouldn't be doing it. And when I switched that train of thinking, new questions came to mind, but the answers weren't in the NIOSH reports. So that inspired me at an age when people were having their midlife crises and buying their red convertibles and driving with the tops down as their way of resolving their midlife crises. My midlife crisis was that I went back to school. And for 5 years, immersed myself in a doctoral program that was trying to uncover and understand and answer the questions, the learning questions that were on my mind. And I really didn't know where it was going to lead. In fact, initially, I thought this is all a leadership issue. It's just bad leaders making bad leader decisions. And it was kind of by accident that I stumbled into the pathway of situational awareness. And at that time, sadly, there wasn't any fire service research on the topic of situational awareness. All the research was done mostly with aviation, medicine, and military. And the reason is that they have money to flow toward research in medicine, aviation, and military. And they're very passionate about trying to learn from error and fix error. And at that time, this is even before there were Fire Act grants to fund research, money just didn't seem to flow to do that kind of research. So I had to really depend heavily on what was already out there for aviation, medicine, and military, and take those lessons and try to transition those lessons for the benefit of the fire service. And the lessons they transitioned well, because it's environments that are high risk, high consequence, time compressed with changing conditions. And that's the environment that creates the stress that leads to the situational awareness problem. So over the course of those arduous, messy 5 years, I immersed myself in the neuroscience of high-risk decision-making. And I was learning things for me. I wasn't necessarily thinking that those were things that I was going to be able to share with others, because as I was learning them, here's what was going through my mind. oh my God, how did I miss the class that taught this? And how did I miss the class that taught that? Holy cow, Rich, you attended a lot of training. You went to a lot of conferences. You went to the National Fire Academy. Somewhere along the way, you didn't get these lessons. And I was thinking like I was the only one left out of the loop, that other people were a lot smarter on all this than I was. Well, then I went to a conference and I presented a program that I called Decision Making Under Stress. And it was only an hour, I don't remember exactly what it was, hour and a half program. And when the program was done, people started like lining up to talk to me and share their experiences and their stories and say things like, no one's ever taught us this. And I mean, it was very humbling and gratifying, because I didn't know if I was going to have them throwing things at me saying, you're wasting our time, we know this already. That's what kind of goes through your mind when you're making like a brand new program that you're sharing and thinking, well, if I don't know this, others don't know this. But then my imposter syndrome mind is saying, everybody probably knows this, I'm just the only one who doesn't. Well, I found out that I was onto something. And I really wasn't even talking at that time at that conference about situational awareness. It was really about what happens to us under stress when we're making high risk, high consequence decisions. And that was the whole focus of that program. And then once I completed the doctoral program, then I started to put together some programs on situational awareness. I've written some books, and I think we're here to maybe talk about those or one of those, but there's 6 books now, on the topic of situational awareness and high risk decision making. And and I come to realize it's a big topic that responders don't know as much as they need to know about it. And the more I've gone out and shared the message, the more feedback I've gotten from responders that is something like, where has this been? No one taught us this. How did we miss this? All the things that I was thinking, was just me. They're now telling me it's them too. And if you think about it, like at that time, now I think things are a little different now, but at that time, if you picked a Firefighter 1 or Firefighter 1 and 2 book, pick the publisher, and I won't single any of them out, but I will tell you that I looked at all of them at that time, and there was 0 mention of situational awareness in any of those books at that time. Now things have changed, and there is more mention of it, but I guess I would like that before I die, I would like to maybe just see a chapter in those books that are now heading toward 5 and 6 inches thick, training books, that there maybe just be a dedicated chapter on situational awareness instead of just a mention of it while they're talking about, hazmat responses or rope rescues or water rescues, and making a casual reference to how important situational awareness is, because I don't know that it really shares the depth of the topic enough for responders to really get it. And that kind of creates opportunity for me, obviously, because if I can write the books that they can use, then maybe the books will be helpful, and they'll engage by getting a book, or maybe some organizations will engage by having me come and do a program for them. So personally, this vacuum of knowledge is very beneficial for me as a business of teaching this, but it leaves me really, really disappointed, because over the course of my 15 years of teaching this, I actually keep track of how many people I've taught it to, and there's over 90,000. You're like, wow, 90,000. 90,000 is not an impressive number. 90,000 is a dismal number, because if you think, let's just say hypothetically in America, there are well over 1 million firefighters, and maybe closer, pushing to like 1.3 million. And you just say over the last 15 years, probably a third of them have retired or left the fire service, career or volunteer. And when you put pencil to paper and you do the math on it, it means still serving today, I've touched the lives of maybe about 1.5% to 2% of the fire service with this message. And that is dismally tragic. And it really leaves me personally, even though I'm trying hard, it leaves me very disappointed to think that a topic, an issue with situational awareness could leave somebody getting killed so quickly that they don't even see it coming. And yet we as the fire service have done so little to change that. And, and I think that's what really inspired me to write the books. And, I got the website with 400 free blog articles, almost 400 free podcast episodes, which are also on video on YouTube now, the books, an academy, live programs. I've done everything but write a note, stick it in a bottle, and sail it down the river, trying to help responders get smarter about this topic. And you asked a very short and simple question, and you got a really long answer. But I want to say thank you for allowing me the latitude to vent that out, because I don't get to do that very often. I can only vent that out to my wife so many times, and then she says, "Take out the trash."
Yeah. Well, and I think we are getting better in a lot of terms. Like even, you look at a NIOSH report or especially in the wildland fire service, when they're doing a wildland fire fatality now, they're looking more at those situational awareness things, or the barriers, that we're going to talk about here in a little bit, that it's not just placing blame anymore. But I go back to what you were talking about, that attitude of, well, they screwed up. They did something wrong. How did they not see this coming? And how it is, a lot of times when we teach, we'll use like a case study from a fire department about something that went wrong on a fire. And when you're sitting at the kitchen table, the first thing they say is, well, where was this fire department? Were they at this, and that seems like that's the deterrent. Well, they're not in a progressive agency, so that's how that happened to them. But, we've talked about it before. I was trapped in a garage on a wildland fire in 2006. We just had the 15-year anniversary. And, you talk about, well, how did they not see this coming? There was all these signs. We saw a huge fire tornado before our burnover. And I looked over at my firefighter, and I didn't say, hey, we need to be heads up. This is extreme fire behavior. We need to look at our tactics. I looked at my firefighter and said, get a picture of that. That's bitching. That's what, and that's where the situational awareness gap was, and it got us to the point where we get trapped in this garage. And all of the things you talk about in this book, like I said, mine was the same thing. My incident happened 15 years ago, and all I could latch onto at the time was crew resource management. You brought up the aviation industry and some of that. I could latch on to I could latch onto Swiss cheese model. There was a couple things I could latch onto when I started presenting on my burnover, but there wasn't a lot of stuff, like you said, in the fire service for that.
Yeah, it. I think what somebody in my show, I don't want to call it a podcast anymore because it's a video on YouTube. So my show really is dedicated to giving a platform to people like you who've had near misses. And I'd say near misses. Some of my interview were right alongside somebody who died, so it isn't necessarily a near miss. It was definitely a strong hit. But to give them the platform so that they could share the lessons, so that the people that would watch and listen to that show could hear firsthand from real responders how they're impacted by these various barriers, versus some talking head PhD who is trying to tell them how the world turns. I think a lot of them, when they see the PhD behind my name, lose the sight of the fact that I spent 33 years, doing fire and EMS, and only looked at, well, he's he was a firefighter, but he turned academic, and they immediately start to judge or dismiss think that they're going to get an academic lecture from me. They're not, and the show is really dedicated to letting the people who've had the near misses become the teachers and let them say, look, this really happens. It really did happen to me, and I'd like to consider myself, on the scale of physical and mental preparation, above average, and still had this tragic or near tragic event occur to me. You're here, Jesse, and you can judge whether good decision making or luck saved you, and I won't put you on the spot to say so. But there are a lot of them that say, if not for a good helping of luck, I wouldn't even be here to be interviewing with you, because it was luck that saved me, not skill. But from that luck, if they reflectively look back at what happened, they're able to see after the fact, able to see the lessons of what happened and why, and those that can reflect on mistakes and learn from them and then not repeat them are the smartest among us.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things, as I go through your book and I look at all those barriers, it's like, yep, that one happened. Yep, that one happened. And the crazy thing is, even 15 years later, I'm still learning about that fire and how certain things went down, because all four of us on that crew don't have the exact same story. And that, I look at like police officer shootouts where they talk about, almost 50% of them, don't remember certain things. And then there's, 25% that remember something that didn't even happen. And I think that was the hardest thing, is like matching all those up to all four crew members. Like, well, what did you remember? And what do you, because we all had different stories in the whole thing. And
yeah,
I teach it. It's like, I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but it's to the best of my ability. I think it's accurate.
I had a department that had a line of duty death that they had OSHA come in, they had ATF come in because it was arson. They had the state fire investigators, they had NIOSH come in, and eventually, about a month and a half into this, the chief invited me to come in and kind of look at it from the perspective of situational awareness and decision-making processes. And here we were at the time. Well, by the time I got there and did what I did and went back to present the findings to them, we brought the whole department together. We brought everybody who was on that scene together. There was about 60 of them on this scene that was part of this multi-alarm fire. And it was the first time since the incident that all of them had been together in one space. And what amazed me was how many different stories they had. Now, I already knew this because I'd interviewed them and I knew they had different stories. What I had to do is try to reconcile which story was the truth, right, and which one was confabulated. And, but when they got together, they were realizing, oh, this happened? I didn't know that happened. This happened? Oh, I thought this happened. And then somebody would say, no, this is how it happened. And somebody else would say, no, it's not. It happened this way. And they weren't being argumentative with each other, but it was certainly enlightening to see the difference in memory. And I had to tell them some of this is happening because as time goes by, your recollection of an event morphs and changes. And it can even get as sinister as, say, Jesse, you and I are having a conversation for an incident that we were at, and I tell you something that happened, and you weren't there to witness what happened. That can be stored in your mind as if you were there and actually witnessed that happening. And you will say, I saw this happen with my own eyes. You didn't. What you saw was in your mind's eye, the visual representation of the story that I was telling you that allowed your brain to store that story as a kind of like a movie clip that makes you believe that you actually did witness that. And the fact is, you didn't. You weren't even on that side of the building when it happened. But you'll swear you were there and you did actually see it. When in fact, you didn't. And there's all these little nuances that occur. That's kind of where the neuroscience marries up with this topic so well is I think that many responders we don't know what we don't know. And in some cases, it's very hard to convince somebody what can happen to them at incident scenes when they're under stress. You go to a magic show, all right? And you see, David Copperfield or whoever, take their assistant and put them in a box on stage and cut them in half. That didn't happen. There are laws against cutting people in half on a stage, but they do it. And then they somehow, without having any guts spill onto the stage, are able to piece them all back together and have them come out of that box whole and healthy and waving and smiling to the audience. And it is at that point that a smart person would say that didn't really happen. But boy, they made it seem like it did. And that illusion tricks the brain. The problem is the same illusions that can trick our brains at magic shows can trick our brains on emergency scenes. And in a magic show, we laugh and clap. And on an incident scene, when that same illusion tricks our brain, it can kill us, and there won't be a damn thing funny about it.
So when we, as we're reading the book this month, right, we started to get into some of the barriers and whether it's target fixation or auditory exclusion, complacency, what would be like what's the top three that you would say, like for first responders, this is one of the ones that you need to grasp onto and this is how to fix it?
Yeah, so it's really hard for me to get it to three. As you held up that cover that has the book that has the blue cover on it, that one I focused on 12, what I call the dirty dozen situational awareness barriers. Now, there are over 100 barriers that flaw awareness. So like Mike, I know, has my PhD research in a book that lists them all. I think there's like 116 or 118 of them. And you can, he's going to go get the book. He's the most readingest person I know in my whole life.
Well, that was the best part because he reviewed mine because he's a speed reader. I didn't feel bad about, hey, can you look this one over?
He came to one of my programs in there you go. He came to one of my programs last fall and he brought all the books with him. And I think there was one that maybe I hadn't signed for him. And he's like, can you sign this one? And it's like, you're a groupie, Mike. you're my biggest fan. But anyhow, the research book lists all the barriers, and there's more than 100 of them, and we should have some familiarity with all of them. But we really should be paying close attention to the dirty dozen because those are the ones that are most often likely to happen, and those are the ones that are addressed in that book. I think it'd be really hard for me to get it down to three, but I can talk about maybe three among the 12. You had mentioned task fixation and auditory exclusion. I think auditory exclusion. I can't remember the few that you rattled off.
Complacency was the other
complacency.
one I threw out there, but
yeah. I mean, I think complacency is probably one of those that every responder knows can and does happen, and probably knows that it can and has happened to them, and has witnessed and experienced it firsthand. And even though complacency is one of the dirty dozen, I don't know that it's one that, if I talked about it, somebody'd say, geez, I never knew that I could become complacent minded. They know. Now, doing something about it, that's different. It's one thing to, like me, it's one thing to know I'm fat. It's a different thing to lose weight. So, awareness of awareness is maybe the first step, knowing that it's a problem. I think there are a lot of firefighters who have quite the familiarity with a barrier like complacency. But take a different one, like confabulation, and that might even be a term that somebody hasn't ever even heard of before, let alone ever known that it has happened to them, or even what to do about it if it has happened to them. And complacency confabulation is one of the dirty dozen barriers of situational awareness. So for those who might not be as familiar with that one, I can explain that we have two sets of eyes. We have the eyes in the front of our face, the biological eyes, but we have a second set of eyes inside of our brain called the mind's eye. And the mind's eye can see the world very differently than our biological eyes. Our mind's eye sees things based on past experiences, based on training, based on videos that we watch, based on stories we've been told, based on our upbringing, our religious beliefs, our political beliefs, our biases, our prejudices. The mind's eye accesses a much bigger database of knowledge than what just is coming through the biological eyes. Now, the sinister part of this is the biological eyes, they never lie. I mean, they're like a video recorder. They see the world as it is. Now, you might see something and be confused about what it is that you're seeing, and we'll set that aside because that's a different issue. In other words, the biological eyes really just see the world as it is. Now, you might not remember it as it saw it, but it sees it as it is. But the mind's eye can see the input of the biological eyes, and then it can morph that fact into a whole different reality. And the most sinister part about this, there's two things about it. One, you may not even know that it's happening. And two, when we are under stress, if our brain has to make a decision, well, I've got these two competing realities. The reality that's coming through my eyes and the reality that's existing in my mind's eye. Which reality should I believe? If given the choice under stress, the brain will almost always default to the mind's eye because of how many different data points the word would be triangulating to create that reality, which in the mind's eye means that reality is more trustworthy than the other reality. And in true reality, just the opposite is probably the case. And we can find ourselves hearing things that were never said, not hearing things that were said, seeing things that never happened, not seeing the things that did happen. And after the fact, you might have an actual recording, body cam for like police officers or somebody on a scene with a recording device, and you watch that afterwards and you say, geez, I didn't hear that. Yeah, you did. No, I didn't. You acknowledged the radio traffic with a 10-4. Well, I don't even remember that. Well, regardless of the fact whether you remember it, it happened and you knew it happened, but you might have morphed that into a whole different reality. And as you know, you think about it just in general terms, we tend to listen to people who are telling us what we want to hear. And we tend not to listen so well to the people who aren't telling us what we don't want to hear. Well, part of this confabulation is the brain can take what is actually being heard and morph it into what we want to hear instead of what really is being said. You know, we see what we want to see and we hear what we want to hear. And when it happens, and this is probably the most tragic part of it, we may not even realize it's happening. After the fact, it may be more obvious to us that it happened, but in the moment, it may not be so obvious. So we find ourselves then forming situational awareness on a flawed reality. which then drives us to make decisions that are based on a flawed awareness. And in the moment, we think our awareness, we're keeping our head on a swivel and we're looking around and we're paying attention, and we think we're doing everything right to build this strong understanding of what is happening. And all the while, it's a false reality. We literally can hallucinate realities in our world under stress. Actually, we can do it even when we're not under stress. So like in a class, when I say, everyone hallucinates, I'll always have somebody in the class that says, well, that's not true, I don't. And then I'll say, well, just come on up to the front of the room and I'll be glad to run an exercise to make you hallucinate. And they'll come up like all full of their confidence, and then I do my magic, which is just the same kind of magic that magicians use to trick a brain, and I'll make someone hallucinate right in front of the entire audience. And then they say, holy, bleep, bleep, bleep. I never thought in a million years that I would be able to hallucinate and so easily. But the reality is that we humans, we're hallucinating all the time. If our eyes are open, we're hallucinating. If our ears are open, we're hallucinating, because the mind's eye changes the reality to be what it thinks it should be based on all of those other connective points of knowledge. So when you talk about, Jesse, like the most challenging barriers, what I would say, from what I know and what I teach, the most challenging are the ones that responders don't know anything about. Like, they know about complacency. So even though I talk about it in a class, I don't dwell and spend a lot of time on complacency, because responders know that they can become complacent. But I'll spend a lot of time talking about those barriers that, had they not been exposed to me, they would have no idea that those barriers even existed or could impact them. Confabulation being one, auditory exclusion, being another. So it's those barriers that I would want responders to most understand. But one of the hurdles I have to get over is their denial, because they don't believe it. They're like, only a dumb person would let that happen to them. I'm smart, I'm experienced, I'm engaged, my head's on a swivel, I pay attention. They're in this act of denial. And then as I start to do some of my hands-on exercises and demonstrate this, they go from denial to humble because they see it. They see their own vulnerability. And I tell them when I'm doing these exercises, don't get embarrassed. It's going to happen. I'm going to tell you now, it's going to happen. Don't get embarrassed when it happens. This is the safest learning environment you can be in. You can mess everything up, and we can chuckle a little bit, and you can go home whole and healthy. This is the place to learn about this, not on an incident scene, but learn about it here, and maybe put some tips into your back pocket about how to keep yourself from having some of these things happen. Now, unfortunately, Jesse, for some of these things, there aren't good solutions. How do I keep my brain from confabulating a reality? You can't, because it happens at a level that is outside of your conscious control. So as much as we think we're in control of everything that's happening inside that cranial space, we're not. Especially under stress, we're not. A lot of that happens with automatic processing. Some of it due to how we're trained, our level of experience, habits that we've developed, genetic development of our species. The fight-flight response is not something that we willfully develop. It's genetically ingrained in DNA over millions of years of evolution. And, I think probably most responders have heard about, fight or flight response. They maybe don't know so much about the freeze response that could be part of fight or flight. But, so again, you asked a very short question, you got a very long answer. I think the most challenging barriers, like if a responder were to have that book and they were, going through the book trying to get the quick read out of it, that they would spend their most time with the barriers they know least about, so that they, again, not to sound nerdy, they can develop an awareness about awareness, which becomes really important. The incident scene is not the time to be learning about your awareness. Oh, you'll learn, but usually painfully.
Now, this book that we read this month isn't completely towards first responders. It gets into some industrial stuff. And one of the things you talk about is when you have a culture that is looking for working towards production or profit more than the safety culture that should be embedded there, especially in some of these organizations that you talk about. I just watched the documentary on Boeing, the downfall with the 737 Max. I'm sure you were really excited about that one with how much flying you're doing when that was going on. But how does that relate to the fire service? Because we're not usually in a profit-driven, obviously, mindset, but sometimes in a production, or we just to get things done, we might go a little further into something than we should or whatever. But
yeah, let me say first up this disclaimer of why I recommended this book when it is focused mostly on industry. And you know this already, Jesse, because we talked about it. This was my least expensive book, and therefore the least painful way for somebody to get connected with the message without spending maybe 2 times as much as they had to spend to get that book. But the lessons, the examples are industry examples, but the lessons of the 12 barriers are universal to every high risk, high consequence, time compressed, stressed environment. So that's why that book. But for responders, like in industry, an organization can become driven by profit as the reason for performance. So if we had to take that and equate that into our world, which is not for profit, you could say that we in public safety can become, again, a situational awareness barrier. And I don't have the book in front of me, so you might think that I'd have memorized exactly which 12 barriers that I talked about in that book, but I don't have it memorized. But one of the barriers that I probably talked about is something called mission myopia. Does that ring a bell for you, that what is in that book?
I don't know if that one necessarily was,
Okay.
but
All right. So you get a lesson here. So mission myopia, the medical condition of myopia is that you essentially lose, for medical reasons, you lose the vision of your periphery, and you start to get to where your vision is kind of more tunneled, although not because of a stress event, but because of a medical condition. As you become myopic, you start to narrowly see the world. A firefighter who becomes mission myopic would narrow their vision or narrow their awareness of the bigger picture of things that are happening in their periphery, because they're so mission focused, so mission committed. We got to get this hole in the roof. I'm on the truck company. That's our mission. And you find yourself so committed to the mission that you're not really conducting a appropriate assessment as to whether that mission you're on, get that hole cut, actually fits the conditions that you're experiencing at that point in time. It's almost like the conditions don't matter as much as mission accomplishment matters. And you put that priority toward mission drives the action, not an assessment and awareness of conditions. In other words, does what we want to do make sense to the environment that we're about to do this in? When you're mission myopic, you don't think or ask that question because you don't care. You're going to do that mission. Come hell or high water, you're you're completely committed to the mission. And some responders that can get completely committed to a mission before they even get on the scene. They know when I get on the scene, this is my task. Maybe it was assigned to me, or maybe it's pre-assigned by procedure of the department. First truck company goes to the roof. I think if you look at the after action of the incident where Pete Dern was burned, you find some of this mission myopic commitment to task happening. And I'm not judging that which happened to him, because it was very, very disturbing and very tragic. But you see some of the things, like our department's procedures say first engine takes a line through the front door, first truck goes to the roof. Well, when you're so committed to the belief that the first truck goes to the roof for every working fire, that first truck is going to the roof, whether the conditions match the action or whether they don't, because you're mission myopic. So as industry can get this, commitment to production, and sometimes driven by performance incentives, financial performance incentives, we can find ourselves getting committed to a mission that doesn't make sense, not for financial reasons, but because of, then you introduce the potential of a variety of other barriers, like ego, bravado, pride, the sense of accomplishment, the fear. That's a significant barrier to awareness. The fear that if we don't get the mission accomplished, that others will judge us harshly, or think we're not worthy, or we're not capable, or we're not good enough. We spend our career building up our reputation among our peers, and we certainly don't want to damage that by doing something that appears that we're a little too conservative in our decision making or how we approach a problem, because the conditions weren't right. So we get driven by fear or pride or ego or bravado. It drives us to be mission myopic. I'm getting this task accomplished no matter what. And there really isn't anything that anybody's going to tell me that will change my mind. In fact, if they try to change my mind, I'm probably going to give them a beat down. Or I'm going to say, we almost got it, 2 more minutes, leave us in here. We've all experienced something like that, which, makes me scratch my head and say, well, why do we do that? If somebody from the outside says it's time to come out because this building is coming down or it's going to flash over, why would we say, leave me in here? I want to experience that. They don't, but I mean, it's like, why this crazy disconnect between, those who want to help us live to fight another day and those who want to, die on the sword. Jesse had a firefighter once in a program. I was talking about how a commander will feel a sense of stress when they have to make that decision when crews on the inside doing offensive operations and maybe not being successful. The stress and the challenge and how difficult it is for a commander to flip the switch and say, okay, everybody come out. We're abandoning the offensive operation. We're going to go to a defensive operation. How challenging that is, and how much potential ridicule they would stand for making a decision like that. And I had a firefighter in a program say to the whole class, he said, I would rather die in a fire than be ordered out. And there are a few things that leave me speechless. And that one left me speechless. I didn't know what to say to that. I'd rather die than be ordered out.
Oh. Yeah, there's a class that I taught not too long ago called the Fire Service Lens, and you talk about every single one of those levels has different goggle views, right? Task level, the firefighter; tactical level, the captain; and then the strategic level that I see outside. And but not only is it understanding, like, look, each one of them has a different vision of what's going on, but they also have blind spots that don't always connect. That chief officer in their vehicle out front, they didn't get the 360 view like the captain did, or maybe they're not getting the interior view. So every single one of them, it's trying to connect those through good SA, radio, and 360s and the other stuff. But
that's a great point, because I think it's really dangerous for any firefighter to delegate or relegate their situational awareness to someone else. That a crew on the inside will say, well, I'm going to let the incident commander on the outside who can see big picture worry about my situational awareness. I'm just going to, advance the hose and put the fire out. I think every firefighter, every one of them, every rank needs to understand how to develop and maintain their own situational awareness. If for no other reason, you can have a firefighter and a captain with differing levels of experience have a intuitive response to what is happening, a gut feeling about what is happening that would be a strong indicator that the conditions aren't right. And if they would speak up, might be able to say something that would get the crew out of that environment into a position of safety. Now, newer firefighters tend not to speak up to their superiors, which, they're taught in the academy, just shut up and listen. You don't know enough to have an opinion yet. But then when they graduate, then they go out into the street, does that lesson carry on with them? I'm not smart enough to have an opinion yet. You think about like somebody that's been on the fire service for 30 years and somebody that's been in the fire service for 30 months. The 30-year person obviously has a lot more street experience, but the person who's been on 30 months is fresh out of firefighter 1 and 2. And I would bet that they have learned some things that the 30-year person, when they went through the training, didn't learn. Or if they did learn, they've since forgotten. Right. And now you got this 30-month person who has what I would call fresh knowledge, a recent exposure to lessons that maybe somebody more experienced has, that it has just, faded away over time. So to dismiss or to relegate our situational awareness to someone else, or to think that if one person thinks that everything's okay and another person thinks that there's cause for concern, that we should go in the direction of the more senior person or the officer instead of the firefighter. The rank does not create situational awareness. And so having firefighters know when and how to speak up, and ensuring that having a respect that everyone in a different physical position on a fire ground has the potential to have a very different situational awareness to what is happening, and knowing when and how to speak up when they are experiencing something that holds that potential for consequence becomes pretty doggone important if they'll speak up. I've interviewed firefighters that didn't speak up. They should have, but they didn't. And they'll say to me things like, I knew it was going to go bad. I knew it was going to happen. I said, well, you mean, you knew it was going to happen because of things that have happened in the past? No, at that actual incident, I knew it was going to happen. Right. And you didn't speak up? Oh, no. Well, why? Oh, I'm just a firefighter. I'm not an officer. Surely if I could see it, the officers could see it too. And if they thought it was okay, then it must have been okay. You see how easy it is to us to get tricked into a weird sense of thinking that, if my awareness tells me that this is happening, surely the smarter people on this incident see it too, which may not at all be the case.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up to the hour here, so I really enjoyed your book, and I know it's going to help out in the field and with my second book, and we'll coordinate on that more as time comes up. Once I get a little bit more on paper, I'll send it over to you. But sure. I appreciate your time. I'm going to turn it over to the members and see if anybody has anything else. And again, for you guys as members, at this point, you can consider the camera off. But if we still have some great conversations and you're okay with it being put out there in the final video, let me know. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. If you guys have any questions for Rich, then he can go through that with you.
Be gentle, guys. You can trip me up quick.
I know that's not the case. Does have anything?
I guess I had one question quick. How hard was it to put into words kind of a lot of what we intuitively know? Like, like a lot of this stuff, I don't want to say it was like I already knew it beforehand, but it was like, oh, okay, that's why my brain does this. Oh, why that's why I do that. Was it hard to put all those into words, kind of what you intuitively know already?
You mean like when I wrote the book? Come back to me, Phil.
Oh, yeah. Like when you wrote the book, like how hard was it to like example? I jumped in on the confabulation chapter, which was perfect timing because that's the one that really kind of stood out to me. It's like
Yeah.
how do you explain that? Like when I first read it, it's like, well, how do you really know what perception is reality? Like
Yeah.
what I see is real versus what you see is real, type of thing.
Well, for me, you know, as I was immersing into this topic and learning what I share in that book, much of it was new to me. You know, I didn't know about confabulation, that 5-syllable word. You know, when I read that for the first, I think I probably went to Google and Googled definition for confabulation because I didn't know. And as I was reading more and more and learning more and more, I was absolutely stunned at how many times I realized that's happened to me. And that's happened to me. And that's happened to me, but I didn't know it had a name. And I surely thought maybe I was the only one that it ever happened to. And now I'm finding out it happens all the time to people. And the challenge for me when I wrote that book and all the books except maybe the research book, which is the actual science of behind it, you know, so if you're science nerdy and you want the book that has the 170 some cited references, you know, that's the one to get. That's not necessarily the one I promote for people to buy. Yeah, that's it. Because it's, you know, it's the nerdy background. You know, if you enjoy eating the sausage but you don't want to watch it being made, that's not the book for you. But as I was immersing in this, what I found out, Phil, was there's a lot of really smart people that know a lot about this, but they were not saying it in a way that was friendly for me to understand. I had to spend a lot of time thinking, what does this mean for us in the fire service? And how can I present this in a way that is not going to be boring or so complex as somebody scratches their head and says, I don't get it. Like if you read that book and you could say, I really understand what he was laying down here, then you are enjoying the sausage. And you would not have enjoyed the making of the sausage part of it, where it's just where I had to take these very academically written research studies and draw out the lesson and synthesize it into a message that I think that first responders or a blue collar worker in industry can say, that makes sense to me. I understand what he is saying. I can relate to that. I have experienced it. The hard part was making that transition of neuroscience research to frontline worker, first responder friendly message. And I hope with all my heart that I hit the mark, because I don't want somebody to put that book down and say, this is too heavy of a read for me, too complex and too, too far out there. I hope like with that one that Jesse held up is I would hope that they would pick that book up and say, I can't put it down. Oh my gosh, every chapter is like something new and interesting for me. Now, you know, I don't know that I write the kind of books that people can't put down. But you know, that's kind of like what my ambition would be, is that they would be so inspired by the way the content is presented that it becomes an easy read that's easy to understand and easy to apply to the work that they do. So they don't have to put a lot of complex thought into it. I've already done that for them and just tried to take a really complex topic and present it in a friendly way. That's what I've tried to do, Phil. You get to be the judge if that, if I hit the mark with that. But that's always what I'm trying to do with, I think that's what all of us are trying to do as instructors, is just be relatable to our audience and not try to preach to them or talk down to them, to be friendly with what we're presenting, to don't be judgmental to those who don't know what we know, but to be the mindset of a teacher that says, okay, you don't know, but my role here is going to be to make sure you know, and that you have an appreciation for it by the time you're done with the book or done with the class. I think that's what all of us, I think that's what the best instructors and authors try to accomplish. I think there's some out there that are just too hung up in trying to impress people with what they know or think they know. And I try real hard not to be that person.
You basically, what do they say? You broke it down to a truckee level or whatever the saying is. But yeah, you took very complex subjects and made it very easy to understand. I definitely thought you hit the mark on that one.
Yeah. Well, having had my first officer appointment as the lieutenant on a tractor-drawn tiller truck company, I wrote to my people.
Well, I definitely found that you also did some mind trickery on me with that book, because there's no page numbers, and I would be in the middle of reading it and we would get a response, and it forced me to do actually a bookmark thing, because I'm like, oh, what page am I on? I was cursing your name a couple of times, like there's no page numbers here. But
holy cow. You know what? Jesse, this is gonna sound like a rookie statement. I didn't realize I didn't put page numbers on that book. that was not on purpose. That was an oversight on my part.
Hey Jesse, check your copy, because mine has page numbers. You must have got a bum copy.
well, maybe there
Mine
is.
does too.
Yeah,
Do yours have page numbers, Jesse?
they do. What was the book that I was reading last that didn't have page numbers? I thought it was yours, because I was like, I'm trying to read
Jesse,
once right now. That's part of the problem.
that's called a confabulated reality, Jesse.
So let's talk about this one, right? Because this one's written for first responders.
Yeah, does that have page numbers?
Yeah, this is why fire engineering put it out, so it definitely has page numbers. What's going to be the biggest leap from going from the one we read from the book club to going to the next one?
That one I wrote to be, well, obviously it's more in depth. The small blue one, I wrote that small blue one that somebody could sit down and read it in 2 hours and be done. And that's how I wanted it to be, is somebody could just, if they took it beginning to end, different people read at different rates, and I'm about the slowest reader there is out there, but I wanted it to be like I could sit down in 2 hours and I could learn what I need to know, no more than that. The Penwell book I wrote that more to be a textbook. So it's written more for something that could be used in a promotional exam or as a textbook in a college course. So therefore, instead of the chapters being, 6 pages and you're done with that lesson, the chapters are more like, 20 or 30 or 40 pages and go in greater depth, greater examples, sharing more lessons, obviously, than what is contained in the other book, and is more really pointed to the first responder. The book is called Situational Awareness for Emergency Response, so it has a very specific audience. The other one is called How Smart Workers Use Situational Awareness to Improve Safety. Well, if you're a first responder and you think of yourself as a worker, we call ourselves first responders, but you're a worker. There's lessons in there for you. But for the worker book, the examples are more general industry books. And I wrote that one for my industry audience, because the other 5 books, industry is like, what do you got for us? Because every book you got's got firefighters on the cover, and that ain't for us. And I'm like, okay, I got to write something, that is for you. And you notice there's not even a picture on the cover, because I didn't want somebody to, we judge books by the cover. I didn't want somebody to look at that cover as they look at those first responder books and say, well, that's not for me. But speaking specifically to the Penwell book, that's probably the best book to use for a textbook for like a college class, and a book for promotional. I didn't really write the Smart Worker book to be used for promotional processes. I would have written it differently if that were the intention of that one. That book, the blue one, the Smart Worker book, is what I call the down and dirty, quick read. Rich, keep all the fluff out of it. Just tell me what I got to know, because I got to make big decisions tomorrow. Now, I don't think you learn it that quick just because you read it once that it is now ingrained. But that's the main difference between those two books.
Cool. Anybody else got anything you want to ask Rich? Throw out there.
Hey, Rich.
Hi, Mike.
You've got, I think in my humble opinion, you've got to mention it, but could you summarize for everybody what else you have out there? Because once again, it's a wealth of knowledge and it can come at many different directions and ways. So I'm not sure if everybody is up to speed on everything. Like you talked about your podcast, your other books, your other things that you have. I think a lot of that would help people too.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I had not come onto this with the intention of promoting anything that I have. It was to talk about the book that you guys were reviewing, and I would have been content with that being the end of the discussion. But thank you for asking, and therefore now I will share some other things. The best place for someone to get connected with me and my message is the website, samatters.com, and that's SA for situational awareness. My whole platform is Situational Awareness Matters. So samatters.com. And if somebody goes there, they'll find everything that I have to offer. And a lot of it's there for free. So there's the blog with over 400 articles, all free to use and download and share. There's the podcast or the show episodes, which are accessible through the website. So if you want to watch them on YouTube, I have clickable links on the website that you can watch the YouTube. If you want to join the podcast, you have to subscribe, on your podcast player to do that. So you got the show, you got the blogs. I have a store. In the store, there are the books. There's video training videos. I have a virtual or a learning management system, an LMS virtual platform with pre-recorded programs. I have an online academy. The online academy takes about 20 hours to get through. It's 14 modules. Of course, if you're Mike, you do it in 2 days because the guy's just Superman. But that's individual results vary, and I don't expect anybody's going to get through it unless they're really committed to it in the time that Mike did. But the academy, the good thing about the academy for a department versus, say, like they go to my virtual platform and they say, well, Rich, here's a 6-hour class that you do on situational awareness that you have recorded that's available here, and you have the online academy. What's the difference? The main difference is, and it depends on what a department is looking for. Like if it's an individual, I'd say you could take the 6-hour class and learn a lot. But if you want to take the deepest dive, you do the academy. But the main difference is that, say a department buys the 6-hour program for their members, there's nothing that prevents somebody from clicking on it and going and taking a nap or going to cook lunch or going out to play a round of basketball, and when it's done, come back and say, okay, I completed it, and send a message to their supervisor that said I completed it. Not that firefighters would ever do something like that, but I've been told, rumors along the way that somebody might do something like that. The academy is very different, and Mike, you know this. When you go through the academy, it only plays a short segment of the lesson, say 10 or 15 minutes. And then it stops, and you have to answer some questions, and it won't continue to play and go on until you've answered those questions successfully. And then at the end of that module, there's an examination you have to take, and you have to pass that exam to graduate or to get certified. That's the beauty of this. I actually certify people in situational awareness, which can become handy if a department finds themselves in a bad spot legally because of a situation where maybe some errors in decision making occurred, or somebody's calling into question somebody's technical knowledge. Having completed the academy, they can say, I'm certified in situational awareness. And what allows me to certify them is they have to pass all 14 of those final exams to get the certification. Not 13 out of 14, all 14. And when they go through that process of that rigorous accountability, then I can certify them. I don't even certify people that'll attend a live event because I can't assure you they learned anything. I don't test them at the end of the class. So I have no way to validate that they actually learned. They could sit there face down on their phone for the whole day and I couldn't stop them and I wouldn't know if they learned anything. So the academy adds the rigor that validates learning has occurred. And that's for some people, that's valuable and important. And for some organizations, it's not what they're looking for. So they'll just do like a virtual class. I do live programs. Somebody can have me come in and do a live program. I do live virtual programs. So be on the internet like this, where I can do a live event. I try not to have the live events go more than 2 hours, just because I think that no one should have to suffer sitting there looking at their computer and listening to me for 2 hours. So I try to keep those more condensed. I have a newsletter. Somebody can sign up for that. It's free. And then I'll periodically send them things on situational awareness through the newsletter. And that might be it, unless you're thinking of something that I haven't thought of, Mike, because you're about as connected to me as anybody is, anybody is in the business. You've really been a good student of this message. And even on your social media, you're a good student of the message. And that when somebody posts something, you often come back and make some situational awareness connection to the message that someone else is sharing, which again is helpful to me because it helps to spark people's interest and to keep that message moving forward, which is real important to my mission. Oh, I guess I should say also, for anybody that I don't know if I should say this. I'm going to whisper this, Jesse. Jesse, is this going to go out to people?
Yes, we're going to put it up as far as the video. All this stuff that we've been talking about, this second portion, doesn't need to go out.
Okay.
Whatever you
All
want.
Right. All right. Well, it can go
Translation, out. Jesse, cut and edit.
This can go out, but not for 3 more days.
Oh, copy that.
Because somebody else has to make this announcement instead of me. So, but I'll whisper to you that the 2022 National Fire Service Safety Stand Down is going to be on situational awareness for the first time ever. And somehow I got to throw some love to Mike, that I think he somehow influenced, because he and I were together having dinner and we were talking about this. And Mike, you don't have to say whether you did or didn't, but I think that somehow, whether directly or subliminally, you got somebody thinking about how important this is. But that's going to be the topic of the safety stand down for 2022. And I'm going to be firing all kinds of resources out there for the fire service, articles and podcasts. And we even talked about me doing like a 2-hour webinar type class, like the kind of high level overview about what situational awareness is. But you didn't hear that from me because that announcement hasn't been officially made yet. And I think they're going to make it on like the 28th. So shh.
It's out to a certain group of people, Rich. So it's probably already percolating,
Okay.
Tell a firefighter. So yeah.
Okay.
So I got 2 options. I either cut or edit or wait for 3 days to post this.
That's it. Yeah, you can leave this in there if this is going to go out on the 28th or later. But if it's going out before then, you're going to get me in a lot of trouble, Jesse. If you make the announcement before the IFC and the NFPA and the NVFC and the FDA SOA get a chance to do that. So don't put me in the trick bag. But I'm really excited that is for the first time ever, going to get the message on a national stage, a level of national attention to how important this topic is. And what I'm hoping from the safety stand down is firefighters are going to realize I didn't know what I didn't know about this topic, and we're gonna do our best to get them in the loop. Like I wasn't in the loop before I started this whole journey. I told you I didn't know what I didn't know about this, and I think there are a lot of responders out there in that same spot. And if they'll come along on the journey during the safety stand down, we're going to do our best to get them in the loop. It's going to address situational awareness on 5 topical areas: structural firefighting, EMS, wildland, roadway, and acts of violence. So those will be the themes for the 5 days. And then, there'll be other resources beyond just mine. The NFPA will have some resources, and they'll probably, snag some things from other authors that have written in magazines and things like that. So it won't be just like, the Rich Gasaway show. They'll have other resources available to them too.
Cool. Well, that's the goal. That's what you're trying to do. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
All
Any other
right.
questions that folks have for me? I mean, nothing's off the table here. I mean, you can stump me. I get asked often about the connection between situational awareness and ADHD, and somebody's probably thinking, oh yeah, now that you bring it up. And it's a great question that people ask me with a really lousy answer. And that really lousy answer is I don't know the connection because I haven't researched it. And I'm not even sure that anybody has researched it as far as the fire service goes. So is it a challenge? I think absolutely it's a challenge. Do we have good answers yet? No, we don't have good answers yet. So be patient. There's a lot of researchers doing a lot of things to try to improve our understanding of how brains function and what we can learn about it and how we can improve individuals' performance as it relates to some of these challenging neurological matters like ADHD and other things too, Alzheimer's and dementia and addiction, and just it's just amazing how fast this whole world of research is moving. And I try to narrowly stay in the lane of cherry picking the things that I think are going to be important to the audience that I want to appeal to. But there's a lot more out there than just the things that I'm sharing.
Awesome. All right, guys.
Hey, Rich, I got one more for you real quick. If you were going to recommend like 2 or 3 books to somebody, obviously outside of your material, what would they be?
Oh boy. I think Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, where he talks about System 1 and System 2 thinking, which essentially is using intuitive-based decision-making versus analytical-based decision-making. I mean, you can't go wrong. The guy won a Nobel Prize for his research. So the only caution is that book is a little heavier reading, a little.
He's going to go
more.
He already had.
Yeah, I know he's got it. I knew he would. It's a little more. You have to take your time with it. And let yourself comprehend it a little more. It's not written for the first responder audience, so it's more of a good general read. Mike, I'm going to throw the question back to you, Mike, because you've been a good student of this topic. What have you read that resonated well with you that you thought would be a good read for responders?
Obviously, I would have to recommend in some shape or form Dr. Gary Klein's work. Once again, for first responders, some of that may kind of be written, but Street Lights and Shadows, some of his books, those are really good about understanding intuitive versus naturalistic decision-making, recognition prime decision-making, which is primarily how we operate. So I think that's good. Dr. Sabrina Cohen-Hatton with the UK Fire Service, her work on decision making. Once again, she looked at, are we making decisions? How are we making them? And that is a book written specifically for the fire service and written for firefighters. And it's interesting to contrast some of the European, UK fire service perspectives and how they operate versus how we operate. So I would say those are some good ones, specifically related to this area. Because I think, once again, we have to honestly ask ourselves how much of what we do is a habit, how much of what we do is a decision. You could get into Duhigg's book on, habits. Are they good habits, bad habits, etc.? So that's another one possibly. But
Mike, I'm going to throw it out there. You probably already have this one too, but right now I'm also reading The Field Guide to Human Error. See, you kill me.
There's every book written by Dicker, Holenigal, etc. So yeah, no, you can go all down that whole area too. So yeah, that's another good one. So yeah.
Rich, I will tell you that I've told Mike on several occasions he should be the one that's running the Firefighter Book Club, and Tiger Schmittendorf should be the one running Firefighters and Fire Trucks Getting Ice Cream, because that's up there, both of their alleys. But I just got lucky and latched onto both of them. But Mike should be running this show, man, for sure.
He's quite the prolific reader, which makes me very proud, because the saying, it says leaders are readers, and Mike is one of those people that reads until his eyeballs fall out, but in the process of that, he's really a smart fella that is really good at sharing out the things that he's learning with other people. I mean, you look at those books are not eye candy. I assure you that Mike has read every one of those books that are up there. And the thing about what Mike had, the gift that he has, is he's not just a book smart person, because there are people that are like that. He's able to take that and synthesize it and make it friendly and applicable in, kind of like the same goal that I have with the things that I'm doing. But there are a lot of firefighters out there that wouldn't read a book no matter what. Like my books are available on Kindle. They're in paperback. I've got some hardback copies. My blog articles are some of the content of my books. There are firefighters that wouldn't consume any of that if I read them to them as bedtime stories. In the firehouse, just sat on the side of their bed and read it to them. They wouldn't consume it. Which kind of makes me sad that we have some among our profession that would see reading as punishment. And I have one of those at home as one of my kids who just says, I don't like to read. Well, it's not a matter of liking to read, it's having to read. Listen to the audio book if you don't want to read it, but by God, immerse yourself in learning something. Every day I feel like I got to be smarter than I was the previous day. And I learn that, and I get smarter by either watching or listening or reading somebody's stuff who's smarter. And you do that enough and you'll get smarter, and
well, it beats getting smarter, learning the hard way, and having injuries, scars, and or line of duty deaths. So, and yeah, thanks, Rich. I greatly appreciate it, but way overboard. But I'm able to do that because of people like you that have made the effort to go to that degree and take what you've done and put it out there. And once again, because a prime example, if somebody won't read your book, they sure as heck can watch one of your podcasts. So I think that's a great thing. Or they can read one of your books that's really the 4 series that just goes over the lessons, the incidents and the lessons. So I think that's the key, is whatever works for your learning style. Like Jesse said, I'm lucky I can speed read anything in minutes, but for those that can't, there's a lot of other ways out there to learn. So please take advantage of them.
Yeah. That's wisdom. That's a truth bomb right there. All right. We're going to wrap on this.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks, Rich.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. Thanks, fellas.
Thank you.
Thanks, fellas.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
See you guys next month for Pride and Ownership with Rick Lasky. All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.